Radio Delhi, broadcasting on medium wave 450.5 meters, corresponding to 666 kilohertz. A very warm welcome to our evening transmission, and the time by the studio clock is 5:50 p.m. Please stand by for our next program.
This is All India Radio. You will now hear comments from the press. The Hindu in its editorial title, Karnataka Conundrum, says the Supreme Court's decision to ask the parties to the political crisis in Karnataka to maintain the status quo until it examines the question of law involved is pragmatic and expedient. The Speaker has been asked not to decide the issue of MLA's resignation or disqualification. An order has been passed when one of the questions to be decided is whether the court can give such a direction to the Speaker. It now transpires that legislators can be prevented from resigning by claiming that they have incurred disqualification. It was argued in court that the rebel MLAs are trying to avoid disqualification by tendering resignations. This is astounding, as the penalty for defection is loss of legislative office. Quitting the current post before joining another party is a legal and moral obligation. Defection is condemnable, especially if it is going to bring down one regime and form another. But politicians cannot be tied down to parties against their will by not letting them leave even their legislative positions. The Tribune, in its editorial title, Giving an Inch Won't Pinch, writes, such is the degree of mistrust between the neighbors that even an issue that carries the potential to set in place a template for cordiality and mutual accommodation away from the regular India-Pakistan flare-ups and breakdown in talks is made to negotiate bump after difficult bump. The Kartarpur corridor may well meet its deadline, but the process to come to an agreement on the contours has not been without rancor, something a religious cause such as this could have done without. That perhaps is the nature of the relationship, to test each other all the time without giving an inch. New Delhi has clearly articulated its security concerns, and when Islamabad chooses to reserve a place on the table for a proclaimed pro-Khalistani, knowing well that the only thing that it would achieve is to rankle the Indians, the task ahead gets tougher. The Indian Express, in its editorial title, The Real Cure, writes, the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index MPI 2019 report, an initiative of the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative and the United Nations Development Programme, released last week, says that India has recorded the fastest absolute reduction in the index value among 10 countries across every developing region. According to this report, between 2005-06 and 2015-16, India lifted 271 million out of poverty and reduced deprivations in many of its 10 indicators, particularly in acids, cooking fuel, sanitation and nutrition. It also says that Jharkhand, among the poorest regions in the world, reduced the incidence of multidimensional poverty captured in indicators such as nutrition, sanitation, child mortality, housing, cooking fuel, years of schooling and electricity the fastest. The greatest period of poverty decline between 2005 to 2015-16 in India's recorded history was possible because of high growth averaging over 8% or close to it. That pace of economic growth over a sustained period helped create the fiscal space for welfare programs both by the center and the states, ensuring better access to food, nutrition, health and cooking fuel. The Times of India, in its editorial title, Adapt to Change, writes, not for the first time has Chennai's perennial water crisis resulted in trains being used to ferry water to the parched city. But this time the problem has assumed frightening proportions. Chennai's problems should be juxtaposed with the progress of the southwest monsoon to foreground a larger challenge India faces. The nature and scale of this challenge are often ignored when the monsoon picks up pace in July, but that shouldn't be the case. It's time to acknowledge that India's climatic pattern is changing. Collective effort should be directed towards adapting to this change. The change has been showing up in interconnected areas. First, research shows that there is an increase in the frequency and magnitude of extreme rainfall in India in the general backdrop of a dry epoch. Second, the past 5 years have been the warmest in modern record. Third, a consequence of these shifts is that sea levels are rising. Government recently informed Parliament that the sea level has been rising at the annual rate of 5.16 millimeter in Diamond Harbour, Bengal, a level noticeably higher than the global average. The Asian Age, in its editorial title, Save Children from Abuse, says, the concern shown by the top court and the Chief Justice of India in taking up the alarming rise in child sexual assault cases is laudable. The fact that 24,212 FIRs were registered in the first 6 months this year is a pointer to how shockingly prevalent such assaults on the most innocent of people have become. The suggestion from the top court that special courts be set up to fast-track cases is most welcome. The slowness of the justice delivery system has certainly played a part in emboldening these abysmal copycat acts that have brought a bad name to the country, while